Friend of the program, Tony Ferrari, released his rebuild review of the Detroit Red Wings. How did it go? We're going to talk about it.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Thursday episode of the Locked On Red Wings. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty over there is also host at Locked On Tigers. And want to thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. I just discovered today through our NHL podcast group chat, Scotty, that it's possible to review or leave a star rating at the very least on Spotify. So we're moving on from asking you guys to subscribe to our YouTube page. And now we are
still
very
subscribe
politely,
to YouTube.
Yeah, still definitely subscribe to YouTube. But now we are very politely asking, please leave us a review on Spotify or an Apple Podcast. That'd be very nice. We'd appreciate that.
We would. We'd be very appreciative. Yeah, no, you sent me that thing today, and I immediately ran over and checked the Tigers one too, and I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. Oh, I'm doing fine.
Just fine.
Got a nice little 4.9 going.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Dang, I'm bringing us down. We only got 4.5 over here. I'm just subtracting 0.4 points from the program. What's going on?
I feel like that's not that. That's like Zadina numbers. It's not
okay.
bad.
Well, is that a compliment?
Everyone's gonna get mad at me now. I'm kidding. It's a joke. We're all having a good time. Hey.
Friend of the program, Tony Ferrari, released a rebuild review of the Detroit Red Wings, where he basically looked back at where the rebuild began, how it got to where it's at, and how it's looking towards the future. It was super, super well-researched article, Scotty. And, I mean, what else do you expect from Tony Ferrari? He's our bald king. Like that, he's just the best.
He's the man. I mean, from one bald king to another, honestly. That's high regards.
What are you talking about? You still got hair.
He slapped. No, Tony's the best though, best in the biz, and it was incredible to read. I mean, anything he puts out is great to read, but when you cover the Wings and to see someone who's not part of like Red Wings Twitter or the Red Wings community or like the Detroit news cycle or anything like that, like to see somebody from an outsider's perspective viewpoint of the Red Wings rebuild and give it such high praise is super fun and also super encouraging.
I think he does have a little bit of love for the Detroit Red Wings, though, because of the Morris Sider thing. Because he's one of the few people that had him that high.
Yes, but the first man he hung his hat on. Yeah.
No, and we love that he loves the Red Wings. The immediate thing that first stood out to me when reading this article. Well, one on top of how like it was incredibly detailed, the timeline was that he pinpointed the Datsuk leaving for the KHL and with the combination of Larkin's sophomoric slump in the NHL as the starting point for the rebuild at the moment where it had to begin to tear it all down and start all over. And looking back on it now, I think he was right. Now they did sign Franz Nielsen to that long-term deal and an attempt to try and replace him. But even if Ken Holland wasn't willing to accept the fact that it was time for a rebuild, Datsuk leaving for Russia was the final piece of what was that incredible era. We still had Henrik Zetterberg for a couple more seasons, but with his with his back injuries continuing to mount, it wasn't the same. And not to discount, he still had a couple good seasons left in him. But Datsuk leaving, I mean, that was the moment where I think Red Wings fans, maybe who were still in denial, knew in the back of their head that it was time for the rebuild to begin.
Yeah, no, it was. Again, I think it's so intriguing and so fascinating to see like an outsider's perspective of everything, and the timeline included. I think that's a really accurate place to put it. And the thing I remember the most about that was in Chell, right? In the video game, for like a while, like years after, several years. I want to say the next 2 or 3 games, Datsuk would be on the Coyotes.
Yes, I do
because
remember that.
We trade, right? Like he went to Russia, and then in a trade we traded the rights to him, the NHL rights to him to Arizona, and so for a couple of years, Datsuk was just on the Coyotes, and it was like a weird, like, funny thing. That's one of my, like, most prominent memories from him leaving. Besides, like the day of and everything. But no, I think it's a pretty accurate starting point. And on top of that, going through and seeing then the reality check of the next season, and the temperature of the fan base in the organization kind of starting to get a little sour was definitely an eye-opening thing. I think he's right.
And he broke it down into sections too, and the incredible section just on, like, when Ken Holland first began the rebuild, and the Thomas Tatar trade in Ken Holland's defense was a fantastic move. And he made some other, selling at the trade deadline moves, like trading Ray Mrazek and Nyquist. But the night and day difference between the rebuild between Ken Holland and the rebuild with Yzerman is insane. The moment Yzerman took over, the rebuild took an incredible turn for the better, where, like, the trades that Holland was making weren't horrible when he was selling off, but he wasn't getting the better of the trade deals. And besides the Tatar trade, in my opinion, like, he got a 3rd-round pick for Mrazek, Nyquist netted us a little bit. You fast forward to now, Yzerman in charge, and him going day one, guys, full teardown. This team's going to be bad. Get ready. It's going to suck. And just begin to fleece people left and right. Whereas with Ken Holland, and it might have been also partly where the teams were at the time, but with Ken Holland, the fact that he was just selling off assets and gathering prospect or draft picks, which is what you need to do. But Steve Yzerman, when he comes into power, he not only is accruing draft picks, but he's also making, low risk, high reward type trades where it's like, okay, I'm going to trade Jacob Delarose for 1-for-1 for Robbie Fabbri, who's fighting for a place on the St. Louis Blues, which Tony Ferrari brought up. He's like, he flipped a guy who struggles to find a spot in the NHL lineup with the Blues for a struggling young man who needed a place to start fresh. And Robbie Fabbri has slotted himself into a top 6 winger. Like, those are the moves that Steve Yzerman is doing on top of selling off assets to accrue draft picks. Like, he has been the night and day mentality, where it's kind of like fully embracing the rebuild rather than like reluctantly, like, yeah, we got to do this. It's night and day in the quality. And Tony Ferrari brings up a lot of those moments that make you realize, holy cow, like, this is so much better with Stevie in charge.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a PhD to figure out. That's pretty night and day that how much more efficient the rebuild has been under Yzerman than it was under Holland. The thing with Holland was, like, he's admitted multiple times that he was just trying to keep the streak going.
Yeah,
right. There was no chance he was ever going to start the rebuild. Some people say that the rebuild should have started a couple of years before the streak ended. Right. So, like, that was never going to happen. Ken Holland was 100% focused on just making the postseason. And that was it.
I think there was somebody in his ear telling him to do that too.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think that's absolutely true. And then once the streak ends, that mindset didn't, like you said, there was no full embrace of, okay, we're going to go into a rebuild. That never happened. There was, we're going to retool, not rebuild. We're going to, shed
rebuild
salary.
On the fly.
Right. We're going to keep our players that make us competitive, and we're going to try to just fill in and the like access space and the blanks that are kind of left over. There was no just complete, you know what, this sucks, tear it down, build it back up again. And even aside from philosophy, Steve's just the trades are night and day.
It absolutely is. And, we have I was referencing the Robbie Fabbri, Jacob Delarose, and Steve Yzerman didn't hit on all those trades. I mean, like, remember Brendan Perlini? Who was the guy we traded for? Eric Comrie from Winnipeg, who the Red Wings play tonight. I mean, those are guys that's the things. They were low risk trades. You didn't give up much on taking a flyer on a guy who could turn out to be the next Robbie Fabbri. He traded for Adam Ernie, another guy who needed a fresh start with a new team. And Adam Ernie's been, he's been a decent piece in the bottom six for the team. He was an RFA, so you win out on that end as well. But he's also made huge deals too. And I mean, the drafting has been such a big difference maker as well for the Detroit Red Wings, where when the rebuild started with Ken Holland and Tony Ferrari, I don't know if he inadvertently meant to point this out, but talking about the last few years of the Ken Holland rebuild versus when Steve Yzerman took over, when it comes to drafting, is also night and day, because year one of the rebuild, after the Red Wings missed the playoffs in 2017, they took Michael Rasmussen 10th overall. Tony Ferrari points out that was, or 9th overall, I apologize. Tony Ferrari points out that was the first time that the Detroit Red Wings had a top 10 pick since 1991 when they took LaPointe in the 1991 entry-level draft. And Michael Rasmussen at the time was supposed to be taken in around the teens. He was expected to go in the 15th or 16th, and he got taken 9th overall because his soft hands down low. And obviously, we know how that panned out in the long run. We know where we're at now with Michael Rasmussen and how we feel, but he was getting criticized even at that time for that pick because it seemed like a reach for a guy who didn't skate well, and all he had was size and could stand in front of the net. Like, you're basically drafting Thomas Holmstrom, who is just taller, a taller Thomas Holmstrom at 9th overall, which I love Thomas Holmstrom. He did great, but at 9th overall,
at 9th overall,
I'm just saying.
No, I mean, you're right. That's a pretty, with all due respect, that's a pretty rough way to kick off a rebuild.
Absolutely. And then he follows up the next year. Next year, I'm not with Philip Zadina's draft pick. I will not give him crap.
What are we talking about that?
Well, because we are always talking from the point of hindsight. At the time, I was pumped that Philip Zadina got picked 6th overall because he fell. And then they took Joe Veleno 30th overall because he fell. And, that second first-round pick was Vegas's because that came in the Tatar trade, which was a boon of Ken Holland. So not all the things that Ken Holland did were awful, and some of them were just it didn't pan out the way they expected. The Michael Rasmussen one is still suspect, but I can't fault him for taking Zadina where he did. Although Quinn Hughes probably would have been a better pick. But again, we know that in hindsight. We expected Philip Zadina to be this top-tier goal scorer. Joe Veleno was projected to go top 15 in that draft and fell to 30th. So I can't really fault him for those. But when you're looking at it from a perspective of hindsight, those last few Ken Holland picks aren't panning out as well as the first few Steve Yzerman picks. And you wonder how much of it, was Ken Holland making decisions or was he relying on the people in charge?
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. One of the drafting is another thing. Like, we talked about the trades and such, but the drafting since Yzerman has taken over, he started off with a bang, baby. You know what I mean? Starting off with taking what was believed on draft night to be an unbelievable reach on Seider, and Mo Seider turning into Mo Seider and everything that's followed. Honestly, I mean, people are still really high on almost everyone he's taken since he's taken over the helm and and we're still seeing those guys start to trickle in.
Yeah, and again, we're looking from a perspective of hindsight. I criticized the Moritz Seider pick because I was like, that was a bit of a reach. It seemed like with the exception of Tony Ferrari himself, all the experts were saying that Seider was going to be taken later, but Steve Yzerman and his scouting team pulled one over on the whole entire league, or at least the first 5 teams that drafted in that year, despite the Red Wings falling in the draft. I mean, that was another thing that Tony Ferrari brought up. He's like, they've done this rebuild while falling in the draft lottery 6 or 7 years in a row. Yeah. 6 or 7 years in a row, they've drafted lower than their final standings would have them draft, thanks to the lottery. And they continued to build off of that. He talks about specific players in general in this NHL or Red Wings rebuild review. Red Wings rebuild review. Nice alliteration there. He mentions that Philip Zadina is been great off the puck. He's really shored up his defensive game. He's become a good, consistent threat in creating scoring chances, but his problem continues to just be he can't finish. And that's his take on that polarizing player, Scotty, that Philip Zadina is a good hockey player, but he just hasn't done what he's been meant to do.
Yeah, and like that's those kind of players, you know, there's some players that can only score goals and are bad defenders and bad passers and bad off the puck skaters and bad like setup men and you know what I mean? Like there's players that are bad at everything else except scoring. And it's just brutal that the one thing this dude struggles at is putting the puck in the net because he has shown, and we've talked about it, he has shown that he can be pretty solid in a lot of other areas on the ice. It's just when it comes to scoring puck.
Scoring puck. Yeah, and he's fair about it. And I think, you know, his take is probably the most logical and honest about it all outside of the he sucks or he's really good takes. I mean, the fact of the matter is he's right. He's got good possession numbers. He creates scoring chances. He's good off the puck. He's become a much better defender or a defensive forward. He's shored up that part of his game. He just can't finish. And all the other stuff is great, but in the end, he has to learn how to finish. And I don't want to get in the whole Zadina talk again, but I saw that part and I'm like, Tony gets it. He gets the play.
Tony gets it.
Mentioned Michael Rasmussen, just said he was an overall disappointment. And I was like, yeesh. Yeah, because he was brought in to be a 6'6" center with nice hands down low on the power play, and he is just 6'6".
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, man. Like, you know, what else is there to say? Yes, that's fair to bring up. Fair analysis by Tony.
He's big.
He is big.
He said as well as the team is playing, thanks to the likes of Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond, and he rants and raves about all the things that Scotty and I have raved about so far this season. You know, Lucas Raymond's hockey IQ, his ability to create chances and fool the defenders, and Moritz Seider is just instantaneous. He's like, no one expected Moritz Seider to be as good as he has been in his first year. And he's, you know, with everything we've said, he says in the article regarding those two. But he also parrots what Jake Rivard of Winging It in Motown said about the Detroit Red Wings deficits, and that was the center depth. He said that as good and surprising as the rebuild has been this season, especially with the steps forward they've taken, if they want to become a legitimate contender, the Detroit Red Wings have got to get a second-line center that's a legitimate threat. And that is something that we've talked about. We talked about it with Jake Rivard when we had him on, and it's just 100% true, man. The center depth is going to be one of the biggest detriments to this team until they can get it figured out.
Yeah, we've talked about it a million times, right? It's the analyzing it's interesting because there are some parts of this team that you look at and you go, okay, that's weak right now, but there's reinforcements coming. There are some things that are weak at the NHL level, but not weak within the organization. And those are incredibly different things. The center depth were just scraping the bottom of the barrel in both.
Absolutely.
And that is why it is such a cause for concern, because that's one of the most vital position groups for any championship contending team. And it is the one that we are weakest at in the NHL level and are, I would say, comfortably weakest in across the entire levels, all the levels of the farm.
Well, and here's where Tony differed. And the reason I brought up the center depth thing is because Tony differed in one key area regarding the replacement for Pius Suter in the future, where Jake Rivard referenced going through the offseason and targeting either a free agent or creating a trade to get your second scoring center, highlighting guys like Thomas Hertl to fill that hole. Tony Ferrari said, if this team has a horrible second half of the season and manages to find their way to the bottom of the standings for the Shane Wright lottery, great. But chances are that's not going to happen. They could still target the other two centers that are going to be top 10 picks in Brad Lambert and Logan Cooley. Logan Cooley playing for the national development team down the road from us here in Michigan. And I thought that was interesting because at this point, and you always want to fill your holes with the prospects, but the differing philosophies on how to fill those holes. Whereas Jake Rivard, and then he had a 3-part series of what to do, but either way, in the continue the rebuild or go all in, he was targeting a center in the offseason through free agency or trade. He didn't really focus on the draft pool. I thought the differing philosophies there really was interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is very similar. My opinion on this is very similar to my opinion of the Tigers shortstop situation, in which I think doing both would be sick.
Yeah.
I think it'd be crazy cool to go sign a center and draft 4 next year. I'd be pumped. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's it doesn't have to be so black and white and so all in. It doesn't have to be
one or the other.
Right. You can absolutely go and sign a high-end 2C, low-end 1C, and still go into the draft with the mindset of we are going to draft center, and then just bolster it and turn your biggest weakness into a strength in 2 months. That sounds pretty sick to me.
If you have too much and you need it,
that's the best. Too many setters is the best problem to have in the entire NHL.
Absolutely. And it's just a really well-written article. He said that the Red Wings team could be a playoff threat early as next year, as long as they solve the biggest issues, which again is fixing the rest of the defensive core. He says that the defensive core is taking a step in the right direction, but there's still massive holes. He said Moritz Seider's been good. Philip Perron, been good as an understatement, but Philip Peronic has really settled into his role as more of a depth defenseman where he's more comfortable. And Nick Leddy's been, on pace to be as good as he has his entire career. He said, Gustav Lindstrom's been hot and cold, but he's been pretty good. And I've been paraphrasing most of this, but he did say that Mark Stahl has been a warm body for the Detroit Red Wings, which I thought was really funny wording to use.
He's not wrong.
Missing from that article was DeKeyser and Osterley, though.
You can ask about DeKeyser.
Yeah,
I'm not doing it. You could ask though.
I mean, just overall, it was a great read. There's just so much more to break down. He talked about how Lucas Raymond is responsible for Dylan Larkin. Maybe not responsible, but has been part of the reason of Dylan Larkin's resurgence because he brought that needed added chemistry to that top line. Just the whole article is really well written, and he says in his article way better than I can recap in the 30 minutes we have. And I got to get to a live read here because we're pushing up against it. BetOnline.ag, friends. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use their promo code LOCKEDON to get started from football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline. We're the game.
BetOnline.
All right, Scotty, as much as we'd love to continue breaking down this Tony Ferrari article he wrote about the Detroit Red Wings, the rebuild review, go read it at hockeynews.com, thehockeynews.com. Make sure you go check it out, people. I cannot recommend it enough. We got to preview the Detroit Red Wings' first home game after their sweep on the West Coast, where they face the Winnipeg Jets here tonight at Little Caesars Arena. Now, if there was ever a get-right game with or without Dylan Larkin, it would be this game tonight because, Scotty, this team has got a ton, and I mean a ton of guys missing due to COVID.
Yeah, and it's a home game.
Which always helps.
Which apparently is really the only thing that matters to this team. If you're on the road, doesn't matter talent of opponent, you lose. If you're at home, doesn't matter talent of opponent, you win. And that's just what we do. So it's a home game. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets are missing Nathan Bolu, Ville Heinola, Christian Reichel, Nikolai Ehlers, and possibly Logan Stanley. I mean, right now, just staring at their COVID-19 list, there's 8 players on it, and they missed, I think, they had 3 straight games postponed, maybe 2, if I'm recalling correctly. Actually, I have their schedule right out in front of me here. And they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games postponed due to COVID, and then they played 3, and then had 3 more postponed due to COVID. So the Red Wings are their first game in a while, and they still have guys on COVID that they added on the 10th. So they're going to still be missing players in this game. They're going to be, that's a lot of depth pieces to have to miss. I'm honestly surprised this game is even happening. So with or without Dylan Larkin, I feel like the Red Wings have got to get this win, coming off a horrible road trip where you lost 3 straight against the team now.
Got 2 points.
Got 2 points out of a possible 6. I'm not looking at that as a bright spot, Scotty, to be honest.
I mean, I'm not either.
Yeah, this is a must win for the Red Wings.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to solidify yourself back into that playoff hunt, it absolutely is. I mean, you can't first game back from a bugle. First game back from a brutal road trip.
You got this.
First game back from a beautiful.
Oh my God. Scotty, this is an early recording. You can't even use the excuse that you're tired. Oh.
What is happening?
I don't know. I love you, though.
I don't know what's going on. I've already recorded Tigers today. I'm usually... All right, we're going to go again.
Do you want me to cut that?
I don't care. You can leave it in if you want. All right. Do re mi. All right. First game back from a brutal road trip. You come back home, and then again, apparently you only win on home. Apparently that's all you need. So yes, it's absolutely a must win because it's at home and because your record is so much better at home than it is on the road, and because you just got rinsed for 3 games. Really, you had a few days off in the middle there. I would imagine you could just go right back to Ned in that. I would imagine that's not a problem. So yeah, even without Larks, and I hope he's back, but even without him, I think that would be as close to a must win as you can get if you want to be serious about, hey, we're going to try to sneak into the postseason.
Yeah, and the one thing you want to keep an eye out, though, is they have a lot of guys who are on their COVID list, but only Nikolai Ehlers is one that's been a massive impact player for them this season. He's got 25 points in 33 games, but they still got Kyle Connor with 35 points in 33, Pierre-Luc Dubois with 26 and 33, Scheifele with 23 and 27. They still have a plentiful amount of guys who are just producing at an impressive clip, and they still got 2 really good goaltenders in Connor Hellebuck, who's got like a .915 save percentage, and their backup, Eric Comrie, having only 7 games, so small sample size, but Eric Comrie's got a .914 save percentage. So while they're missing a lot of guys, they are more or less just a lot of depth pieces that are out due to COVID-19, which can still hurt you because, even depth pieces are solid, everyday players in the lineup. So you got to still replace those guys. But if they have all their top guys still in the lineup, it's still not going to be an easy game despite it being on home ice.
Oh, for sure. No, far from a gimme. And I don't think any games these days for this team are really a gimme, especially if they're on the road. This is far from a gimme. Still has some talented players on there, even with the immense, grocery shopping list of COVID names on there. I kind of just keep going back to the goalie situation, man. Like I don't see why you wouldn't go Ned.
I would imagine it's got to be Ned, unless you want to give him a break. But he had an off day, and he had an off day. They've played him 4 straight games before on bad streaks and good streaks. So I don't see why at this point, if he's your undoubted undoubtedly your number one goaltender. Why you wouldn't go back to it?
Indubitably.
Especially when he's coming off such an insane performance, against the Sharks where he made 37 saves.
He was great.
I mean, keep that ball rolling. Stay with the hot hand. Unless you're worried about the workload and you want to do what do they call that NBA?
Load management.
Load management. Unless you want to do load management with a guy who's a rookie still technically. I mean, I can't see any other reason why you would want to go to Thomas Greiss here, because you're going to need your best guys on the ice if you want to try and win this game, because you are missing your captain.
Absolutely. So. Who do you think gets 1C if Larkin doesn't play? You think it's just Fabbri again?
I think it's probably just Fabbri again.
He was good defensively. He made some boneheaded passes, but he actually was pretty solid defensively against the Sharks. For whatever that's worth. I mean, we'd like the top line to score, but he was good defensively.
We would. He's a second line winger at this point who is being forced to play above his pay grade. We've talked about depth issues with the team and players playing above where they're supposed to. I mean, if it's not that, it's either Pius Suter playing above or Michael Rasmussen 1C. I mean, those are your options. So any way you slice it, it's going to be, you're going to hope that Tyler Bertuzzi and Lucas Raymond can again kind of carry the workload on the top line, which they did in the San Jose game, especially Tyler Bertuzzi really well. Bertuzzi having a goal and an assist thanks to a nice shot pass from Filip Hronek off his stick. Just the tip. So
it's so cool we found the origin.
Yeah, did not know that. I personally knew the girl who posted that on social media. So
that's funny. Cool. That's wild. I didn't realize until you until I saw the interaction, and so we talked about it. We recorded last night. And I was like, bro, you just know the girl that made that public and got that. He was like, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, her and I worked for the Oakland University hockey team together. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know until last night where she replied and was like, "Oh, I was the one who posted this." I was like, "What? You were?"
That's such a flex. My goodness, that's such a flex.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, before we wrap things up, we did a narrow miss on mentioning Dennis Cholowski for the second time today, or for 2 episodes in a row, because you were talking about the Arizona trade with Datsuk. We also traded first-round picks, and I almost brought it up, but I didn't want to derail the whole conversation.
It's fair. Narrow miss.
They ended up getting Chichurn, and we ended up getting Dennis Cholowski out of those draft picks. And I was almost like, oh, I could bring up Cholowski for the second time in 2 days. The most he'll ever get mentioned on any podcast, not even Locked On Capitals.
Oh, probably.
Oh, and we're just shooting the crap. But Evgeny Svechnikov update, because he plays for Winnipeg. 30 games, 3 goals, 6 assists.
Wow.
Good for him. I'm assuming that's good production
man.
for him. I don't even know anymore.
Good for Stach. I'm good with where everyone is at this current point involving his situation.
I mean, he's basically an everydayer. I don't want to make the whole conversation.
I'm content. I'm more than content with him being where he is.
Good for him. Good for Svech.
Good for him, though. Good for him.
I always liked him. I always rooted for him. When he signed that one-year deal with the Red Wings, I was like, please, work. I want you to stay around. And he just didn't make it work, and it was whatever. But
that is
whatever.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
We ball.
We absolutely ball. We'll be back with a post-game recap for you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place. It is your team every day.
Every day.